January 12th, 2019, 7:22 in the morning. As Redlick wakes up, it's a horror scene. It's like you heard Mr. Wiggins last week. Something out of a horror movie. It's not one that she asked for. It's not one that she was prepared to deal with. That's not the beginning of this story. The beginning of this story is much earlier. To understand why this story ends the way it does, you need to understand how it begins and how it continues throughout the relationship until we get to where we are right now. 1990s, Cleveland, Ohio, Michael Redlick starts pursuing his former stepdaughter, Danielle Redlick. They begin a relationship. Relationship continues. It goes from a parent to a partner match. But not really. That's not what you heard about. That's not what you saw. These aren't partners. You heard about controlling. You heard Mr. Wiggins just talk about it, the power dynamic in this relationship. The authority. That continued during the entire time that they were married. I heard about how Michael would fly her out to Tennessee, how he would get jobs for her, things like that. She's a possession, bought and paid for. His, nobody else's. His. You heard testimony during this trial about how Michael's insecurities about his job, about his body, relationship, would lead to fights, would lead to physical aggression, violence against his wife, Danielle, in their home and in other areas. You heard how sometimes she would fight back. Mostly she'd normalize it. She'd get flowery words, an apology, a hope that it would be better. It's not. Same cycle continues. You heard those examples of being hit, being pinned down, trapped, defenseless, being choked. The look in his eyes as he would attack her, as he would attack his property. Because of his ego, because of his insecurities. His insecurities that would repeatedly lead to violence against his wife. The purpose of this is not to say he's a bad guy and that he had it coming. The purpose of the testimony about the prior events, the prior violence, aggression, rage, is so that you understand what she is dealing with on January 11th of 2019. As she is trapped, as she is pinned down, as she is smothered, as she is thinking, I'm gonna die in her own kitchen of her own home, in the hands of her own husband. That's why that context is important. And that's why you heard it during this trial. The question before you, has the state convinced you beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Redlick stabbed her husband out of ill will, hatred, malice, evil intent? They've taken away every reasonable doubt. She was doing it to protect herself, to defend herself, because she can't get away. The law does not require her to get away, to retreat, but she could. The only option she had in that kitchen was to take action. Mr. Wiggins says so that she's not in this chair, so she can escape that kitchen, is why she takes action. You heard repeatedly from the state that they cannot tell you why she killed her husband, why she stabbed him. We can, and we'll use the state's evidence to do it. We heard on testimony from his friends, from Jaden. Michael Redlick is a man who, during the relationship, he gets caught cheating. January of 2018. Gets kicked out of the house. His wife files for divorce. But he wants to make it work. He wants to fix the family. He wants to get back together, try and reignite the relationship. Try and make it back home. And he does. Moves in the fall. Things are going okay. You hear Jaden on the stand. Things are going well. Christmas, holidays, going fine. Nice steak dinner in early January. January 10th, 2019. He finds something. Finds that his wife, who he's been trying to reconcile with, trying to get back together with, has been talking to another man behind his back. How can this happen? All right, the defense closing argument underway in Orlando, Florida. We're going to pause and get you right back in where we left off after this break here on Court TV.
Apply now.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Chanley Painter. We are in Orlando, Florida for the closing arguments in the kitchen knife murder trial. Let's get you back in for the defense closing argument.
How can she betray him while he's trying so hard to make this work? How can she do this to him in his mind? So he demands answers. He's calling. She's not answering. January 10th, 12:50, not answered. January 10th, 12:50, 40 seconds. January 10th, 12:52, not answered. January 10th, 12:56, not answered. She's ignoring him. She betrayed him. She's talking to another man, but she won't talk to him. Is he okay with this? Let's listen.
You must have really loved doing this to me. Sleeping with me and then touching them immediately, calling them, whatever you were doing, however you were communicating. Laughing behind my that, didn't you? And don't tell me anymore, oh, you remember who Dan was. You are who Dan is. Your record is what your record says you are. You are Dan, and that's who you've always been. A person that would do something like that. You must have really got a great laugh out of it the other night. Oh, I think I'm going to start studying jiu-jitsu. Yeah, right. You must have just been howling inside through all this, the hurt, hey, reveling in what you were doing to me. I'm going to take jiu-jitsu classes. I'm going home. I'd really appreciate it if you check into a hotel.
We heard from Jaden. What happens the rest of that day? Dad comes home that night. He's very distant, not super talkative. He seemed like he was really upset about something. He was cold. Mom looks nervous. Starts drinking that night. He keeps drinking that night. Things are so tense between Mom and Dad. They're arguing. Dad was very upset. So upset, as you heard from Jaden, that she has to intervene. She has to get between them. She has to take his liquor bottle, throw it away out in the dumpster outside. Those are her words. She's never seen her dad this upset before. January 10th, 2019. January 10th, 2019, 7:38 p.m. Sawyer texts Danielle. Mom, they're yelling so much. Please help me. Who's they? Jaden, Michael. Please help me. He's drunk. They're screaming curse words. Between Danielle and Jaden. 8:20 p.m., January 10th, 2019. Stay in your room. Do not engage. He's in my room. They leave. We need to get out of here. He's being violent. 8:23 p.m. I love you so much, Mom. Are you okay? Her testifies they get out of the house. Danielle drives Jaden away. She goes to stay at a friend's house. After this, I flushed a lot of it down the toilet. Don't be mad at me. She's gone for the night, but what's Miss Redlick doing that same night, January 10th, 2019? Is he asleep yet? I'll check from Sawyer to Danielle. He's passed out, but be quiet. Oh, wait a bit, please wind down. Tell him to go to bed. Turn off the lights around the house. Okay. I just dropped off Jade at a friend's house. Sitting in Alabama Avenue in a vehicle. Waiting to come home. Waiting to be safe to sneak into her own home. Says I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna turn the lights on. Okay. The TV's on. I'm gonna keep it on, just in case. Okay. You shouldn't sleep by me, in case he gets up. I'll go upstairs when I come in and be very, very quiet. Sorry about this mess. Her son, 12-year-old son, texting her how to sneak into the home to avoid her husband. I'll do the lights and wind down. Okay, can't turn them off. Can't turn off the front light because he's there snoring. They'll notice. All right, I'll wait a bit. Can you open the garage so I can come in that way? I'll try. He might notice. Then he does it. Opens the garage. The dog barks. He's up, all caps. He heard, all caps. And he falls back asleep. It's okay. He's falling back asleep. And then she sneaks back in to her own home. That's the scene the night before Michael Redlick dies.
All right, Andrew Parnell trying to paint a picture for the jury in the hours leading up to the alleged murder. Remember, they're arguing self-defense, trying to show she was in fear in those hours leading up to that moment. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get you right back into the courtroom where we left off after this.
719855.
I'm Julia Janae in Orlando, Florida for the kitchen knife murder case, and this is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back. The defense attorneys for Danielle Redlick are trying to convince this jury that when she stabbed her husband, it was in self-defense. Let's go back in and watch the rest of the defense closing argument.
The next morning. Line 22, from Mike Mobile to Danielle's phone, 7 o'clock in the morning, not answered. Where are they? 7 o'clock, they're both home at the Temple Drive address, still hiding out from her husband. We heard from UCF worker Maria Molina. Michael was at work. Leaves a little bit early. She sees him leaving work around 3 o'clock or so. Out at UCF. We know that's not true. Because we know where he is at from 1:13 until 2:30 at home in Winter Park. Between 4:30 and 5. Video collected by Detective Ware. Michael Redlick, 4:37 p.m. Another vodka bottle. Heard from Jaden. She's home with him that afternoon. This is Friday, January 11th. He's apologizing profusely. He's sorry that she had to see him that way the night before. She wouldn't talk to him. She didn't say a word to him that day. The last thing she said was the argument they had had the night before she left the home, before Danielle had to sneak back in. We know Michael takes Sawyer to the football game. Miss Redlick shows up later. We heard from Marcia Inglis, friend at the game. She says, Miss Redlick is upset. She's irritated. There's something on her mind. She says it's been a strange evening. We hear from Pete Dybel, another friend, another coach on the team. Doesn't see Michael and Danielle interact at all at the game. Says that Danielle is quiet. He talks to Michael afterwards. Michael's distracted. He's ready to get out of there. We know that night, Jaden is left around 5:30 before the football game to go stay with a friend. We know that at the football game, Sawyer leaves with the Inglis's, goes to stay with a friend. They go home after the game. Michael calls. No answer. Danielle's phone. Both in Winter Park. Here's the home. During her testimony that she'd gone to McDonald's. Again, she doesn't answer him. .46, Ms. Redlick, President McDonald's, and then she goes home. What is the difference between January 10th and January 11th of 2019? The difference is who else is in the home. The difference is the children getting involved. The difference is Ms. Redlick being able to get out. We heard about the drinking. We saw him buying more liquor. We heard from the medical examiner during the autopsy, 0.09 blood alcohol content for Michael. We heard with the emergency room doctor for Ms. Redlick. She had no alcohol in her system. This is all undisputed evidence. Most of it comes during the state's case in chief. All of it comes from evidence that was obtained by law enforcement. The text messages that I just showed, you heard James Montgomery mention those came from the extraction report. The same thing as the rest of the text, the rest of the emails, the call log, the web history report, same document, that 40,000-page document. The ABC video, you heard that came from Detective Ware, was collected by Detective Ware. You don't need to take Ms. Redlick's word for what led up to this. You don't need to take my word for it. The state has proven how we got to the point where we are. The state has proven the case for Michael Redlick is the aggressor on January 11th. They've proven the case that there's a reason to be angry. He's found out his wife talking to another man, betraying him. Found out that he is fueling that betrayal, that anger, with alcohol. Heard how that night went on the 10th. 5 photos of that night on the 10th. And we know that continues into the 11th. But that's not the case the state is making. The state is making the case that Ms. Redlick killed her husband out of ill will, spite, hatred. What evidence do they have for this? She didn't stab him to protect herself. She stabbed him because she hated him.
All right, we're going to hit the pause button for a minute. Before we go to break, though, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney Franz Borghardt. Franz, what is your impression so far of the defense closing?
The defense is checking all the right boxes. They're establishing that he is the aggressor. They're establishing that she had no choice. It was kill or be killed. That there was no escape. If this defense is going to work, they have to establish those things, and I think they're doing a good job laying it out. The defense attorney's own words. You don't have to take our words for it. It's what the state itself has established. Is it going to be enough to prove to the jury that there's reasonable doubt as to her intent? We'll have to wait and see.
What do you make of her sitting there in court? Are cameras focused in on her demeanor, her reaction during the closings? Anything stand out to you?
Her demeanor throughout the entire trial, in my mind, has been pretty poor. You know, sometimes she cries, sometimes she seems disinterested. She does seem to be paying attention, which is good. She seems angry. So I don't know. I just don't know what a jury is going to do with her demeanor, you know, throughout the closing. But he is doing a very good job on her behalf. So perhaps that will be a distraction from the way she is presenting.
That's true. I did kind of notice her reaction to the prosecutor a little bit like, really? Did he say that? We'll see how it continues on. Again, Franz, you're going to stick with us for this next hour as well, but this will soon be in the jury's hands. Will they believe this is self-defense or cold-blooded murder? What do you think? Let us know. We'll be right back here on Court TV.
He's a lying, rotten son of a bitch. This is how she felt when she plunged that knife into his shoulder.
Being hit, being pinned down, trapped, defenseless, being choked. The look in his eyes as he would attack her.
She told you from her own mouth that she believed that he could be saved. She let him die. This was not done with anything but an evil intent.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Chanley Painter in for Judge Ashley Wilcott. This afternoon, we are following breaking news at this hour in the kitchen knife murder trial. Closing arguments are underway. Danielle Redlick's fate will soon be in the hands of the jury. Now, she has been charged with the second-degree murder in the stabbing death of her husband, Michael Redlick, in 2019. Now, Danielle claims it was self-defense, and the defense is giving its closing arguments now, trying to outline its theory to the jury. Will they believe it? Let's go in and watch right where we left off.
She wanted a life without Michael. His life was happier without him. Because divorce is hard, but apparently murder is easier. This is the state's argument here. There's no theory, there's no evidence about how the altercation happens. It's guesswork, as he said. But you don't have to take those words for it. You saw this evidence presented today, presented over these last 2 weeks to show what happened. So the evidence that the state has pointing towards hatred, pointing towards ill will and the elements for depraved mind. should talk. We should talk about ending this. I'm ready. May of 2018, same email that the state has referenced repeatedly. Mr. Wiggins spoke about the knife imagery, the cutting, the stabbing contained in these writings. Talked about Romeo and Juliet. He argues that Ms. Redlick on May 14, 2018 is calling her shot. That in this email, she's foreshadowing that she's going to kill him with a knife. Does that make sense? Do we look at this email, look at what happened in January of 2019, and believe that these things are related? Believe that this is somehow a prediction of how this relationship is going to end? If you really do have feelings for that woman, I guess now is the time. I'm still hurt, and it cuts, but I have the ability to move on too. So who knows from here? I guess we need to get it together as best we can. This reads more like a suicide note, if anything. She's referencing the pain that he inflicts on her, talking about nobody being happy unless they bleed out. Is this aggressive? Is there anything in this email indicating she's going to attack him? Is her weapon a knife or is it a pin? Is it a computer screen? June 16th, 2022 is apparently the day that the state of Florida discovers a metaphor. That's what's in the email. She's hurt. Feels like a knife wound that he's twisting in her back. That's it. It's not a prediction for a murder 7 months later. The state introduced evidence of pages and pages from the Meet Mindful dating website, indicating earlier on in the case that Ms. Redlick was using the site, particularly on the day that her husband died, but for weeks, a little bit over a month leading up to that. These will go back with you. You can read through them. The conversations that we had, I'm not going to read through everything, but you can look at this in the back if you want to. About hiking, about keeping up Christmas decorations. There's nothing in there about getting rid of a husband. There's nothing in there about running off together. There's nothing in there indicating some sort of plan. Well, these are records.
All right, still with me in Baton Rouge, Louisiana criminal defense attorney Franz Burkhardt, and now joining us, I'd like to welcome in New York criminal defense attorney Marie Pereira. Thank you both for being with me. We hit pause on the defense closing argument, trying to repaint the picture that this wasn't murder, this was self-defense. Marie, I'll start with you on how you think the defense is doing so far.
I think the defense is doing a great job. I think that they're proving by preponderance of the evidence that she feared for her life. And I think him using those text messages and highlighting the all caps from the children prove that he was a scary monster, not just to her, but to the children too. And I think it even trumped Jaden's account that my dad was not violent, because she was involved in those texts too. It really is working for her and proving her theory of self-defense.
Not just text, but also this email, Franz, that the prosecution in closing started with this email from a couple of years earlier, talking about how she felt that she was, had a knife in her bag, bleeding out. That metaphor, the theme the prosecution used, now we see Andrew Parnell trying to turn that to their advantage. How effective was that?
I think he gave the jury a good reason why they can push that aside in terms of the metaphor of the knife. I think there is a plausible argument that, okay, the common theme to this case is betrayal, right? That is on both sides. That is essentially what both sides are alluding to. So I think he did a good job with that. And I agree with Maria. I think they're establishing a good foundation for a self-defense assertion, and maybe that leads to a good old-fashioned acquittal. What I'm concerned about is, and what I'm curious about is, how do they justify the subsequent behavior after the killing of this accused defendant? What are they going to do with that? Because if I'm a juror, I'm thinking, okay, well, that's all fine and good, but explain to us what she did after the killing and why she did it, and the inconsistencies and the lies. I think that is the tall mountain they have to scale.
I agree. That is the big hurdle they're going to have to overcome. We may be hearing it next. So Franz, Marie, stand by with me. Let's watch together. I know you're watching at home. Let us know what you think of the closings so far, what you think the jury may do, because they soon will be deliberating the fate of Danielle. Redlick will take you back inside that courtroom right after this.
Danielle Redlick charged with the murder of her husband, who was once her stepfather.
He stabbed himself.
But will the evidence paint a different picture for this jury?
The kitchen knife murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
$24.
Ms. Redlick, on January 11th, 2019, did you stab your husband?
I did. Yes.
Why?
He was suffocating me. I couldn't breathe, and he had me pinned down. Just the look in his eye, his anger, and I couldn't get away.
Welcome back to our gavel-to-gavel coverage of the kitchen knife murder trial. There you see Danielle Redlick on the witness stand now. Her attorney is making her case and closing arguments before the jury. Who will they believe? Let's go back in and watch the defense.
His arm, though, you heard Ms. Conlon ask in cross-examination, is that going to be consistent with someone who's holding somebody down, smothering them, and that person's trying to fight out? Are those things you can expect to see in that sort of situation? She said, yeah, sure. You heard her come in and talk about defensive wounds for Mr. Redlick, saying that on his arm there was something on the wrist indicating that it was a defensive wound. You heard during the cross-examination that previously, when asked that exact question, was there any? No, there wasn't. Try and rehabilitate that answer, saying, well, what I meant was I didn't see any like stab wounds in the hands. You heard her testimony. Is this a credible person? And her credibility matters because she was asked, how long is Michael Redlick alive for after he sustains this wound? And so when the state's argument, when their theory of the case is that Ms. Redlick stabs him out of hatred and he's dying as he's bleeding out on the floor and she's watching him apparently, looking at him, not doing anything, how long it takes matters. You heard her on the stand say, I can't tell, I don't know. And she said that the way to know that is from observational data, meaning somebody saw it, somebody filmed it, and you're able to observe what's happening. Not scientific data, not medical science that determines how long this is happening. It's different for every case. When you can put a time on it is when the heart is punctured, is stabbed, but we don't have that here. And then she starts saying, when asked, well, it could be up to hours. Some people have these sorts of injuries and they bleed out in hours. Again, she said this was based on other cases that she's heard about. Nothing to do with this case, nothing to do with this injury, nothing to do with this person. Other things. That is not scientific evidence, that is not medical evidence. But when you hear in this courtroom something like that, it can be important. It can be very important when a major issue in this case is what is she doing as he is dying? And you heard that testimony on Monday. But then what did you hear this morning when we talked to Detective Ware? You heard that she had made a different statement. You heard that Dr. Zadovich, back when this case first arose, had said he was dead within 5 to 6 minutes. It's a pretty big difference. Why would we have such conflicting, inconsistent statements from an expert witness, from a person who did the autopsy on the body? Nothing changed. She's not re-examining the body. State was just mentioning, can you trust this witness? Witness credibility. Weighing the evidence. Did the witness at some point make a statement inconsistent with the testimony he or she gave in court? It's a pretty big one. Yes, she did. And again, the evidence doesn't support that he's alive, that he's awake for any substantial amount of time. Certainly not hours. And why does it not support that? We have a pretty clear trail of where he's walking. It's cleaned, but it's still a trail that shows where he's walking. The blood guy agreed with that evidence. We don't have phone calls from him. We don't have him leaving the home. He's not calling 911 for help. He's not doing anything. So we know that his ability to do anything there, very short-lived. Pretty much follows her to the bathroom and then goes back out to the living room, falls down, and that's all. So when Mr. Wiggins is cross-examining Ms. Redlick yesterday on the stand and keeps asking questions about standing over his body with a phone in her hand, choosing not to call 911, choosing to let him die. Is that what you heard from her? That she was choosing to let him die? Or did you hear something else? Did you hear about what happened in the kitchen, about how she ran away, about how she goes in the bathroom, about how she hears him at the bathroom. He doesn't come in. She doesn't see him. She's hiding in the bathroom, the toilet closet. She doesn't hear him anymore. He walks away. She waits, just like the night before. Right after this attack, waiting until it's safe to come out. She doesn't hear him. She waits a little longer. He walks out, and what does she see? Same thing you see. The blood up to the bathroom door and out to the living room. She follows it. She finds her husband. It's at that point when her entire worldview, her entire reality just crashes. No matter what their relationship was, no matter if she wanted to continue in the marriage, no matter if she wanted to divorce him, believe the state, no matter if she hated him and wanted to kill him. The last time she had seen her husband was in the kitchen. He's got her held down. She stabs him one time with that knife. She runs away from him. She hears him come to the bathroom door, leave. She comes out. He's lying on the ground, not moving. It's going to be a jarring situation for anybody. Why, when she walked out of the bathroom, don't believe me, from the autopsy report, from the doctor, the medical examiner, you heard Mr. Wiggins agree, who would think that that wound is going to kill somebody? Stabbing somebody a single time on a shoulder. She didn't stab him 5 times, 10 times. She didn't shoot somebody. One time to get away. She comes back out. He's on the floor, not moving. So she panics. She runs over to him. She attempts to do CPR. She says she couldn't find her phone at that point. He had taken it earlier. We heard that testimony. And we heard about how he was taking it the day before, questioning her, is it your lover boy? Are you making plans with your lover boy? Or in the shower, I'm gonna take photos, I'm gonna send them to him. We know that that was consistent. He was doing that over those 2 days. She can't find her phone. She's on the ground with him, trying to do CPR. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's not trained. It's easy now, 3.5 years later, to look at this and say, why do we have a call at 10:52 and nothing else until the next morning? Everybody processes trauma differently. Walking out, finding her husband laying on the ground in a pool of blood, running to him, trying to see if he's breathing, trying to find anything. I asked her several times, is he moving at all? No. Does he have any reaction to anything that you're doing? No, he doesn't. Are you hearing any breathing? No. She calls 911, it doesn't go through. 911. After that, she panics. The weight of the situation is making itself clear. Her husband, the person who has been in her life for 20 years, is a primary figure, the authority figure, the always present figure there, the father of her children, is now dead. No more. He's done. There will not be any more Michael Redlick. And she experiences that and realizes that in that moment. Understanding the trauma that she experiences right there, understanding the reaction that that has to her, understanding what that does to a person, regardless of what led up to it, regardless of the feelings they may have had for that person at the time. It's pretty heavy.
Everyone processes trauma differently. What will the jury believe? We're going to hit the pause button again, squeeze in a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for being with us on Court TV. We'll be right back.
Protection. Enroll now.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Chanley Painter. Let's get you back inside that Orlando, Florida courtroom as the defense continues to present its closing arguments in the kitchen knife murder trial.
If we know that Michael's the aggressor, that he attacks her and that she reacts, if we know that she's acting in self-defense, if we know that she's justified in the force that she uses. What she does afterward is not relevant for the purpose of the murder charge. It can add context if you don't believe her. If you think that she's covering up the scene, then sure, that can be used as potential evidence of a depraved mind. But that's guesswork. That's connecting dots for the state. There's no evidence of any of that. She's not on trial for correctly handling the situation. She's not on trial for whether she called in. We know from the testimony, from the supporting evidence, that she wasn't going to save him if she called 911 as soon as she finds him. Use that as context when analyzing this charge. And the state says that she did everything she could to make the scene something else, to make it look like something else. She cleaned up her husband's blood on the floor around his dead body. She deleted text messages. I asked her about that. She wasn't sure why. She was worried about the kids. She didn't know what comes next. The traumatic situation that she's under, the panic. What's the playbook for this? How do people deal with this sort of thing? This doesn't come up in school. This doesn't come up. She's confronted with a situation she clearly was not prepared to handle. Doesn't make her guilty of murder. Doesn't make her guilty of manslaughter. Unless you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she did not act in self-defense, stuff afterward doesn't really matter for that charge. For the tampering charge, sure, that's what she's charged with there. But for the murder charge, her inability to handle what happened afterwards doesn't show anything. Does not in any way disprove self-defense. Part of the state's argument to this point is that she searches, as you saw, how to slit your wrist. She starts doing so. She does so. And says that's consciousness of guilt. She understands she's guilty of a crime, and this proves it. This proves that when she woke up, she knew she was guilty of the crime of murder. Somebody's guilt to a crime is determined in this room, at this time, today. Not on January 11, 2019. Not a magic light bulb that pops up over your head when you do something, when you do an act. It says this was a criminal act versus this was a justified act. The situation she described, altercation, she's attacked, she's held down, she's smothered by her husband. We heard that testimony. Whether or not she's able to defend herself in that time, that's for you guys to determine. What she's waking up and seeing, what she's seeing when she walks out of that bathroom door, is her husband lying on the ground, dead. The reaction to that does not make her a criminal. Does not make her guilty of murder. The state argues that the calls she's making afterwards show calculation time, time to think up a story, time to kind of set the stage, set the scene, make up your story, tell everyone what it's going to be. She had 11 hours to do that in the house. She didn't get rid of the knives. They're there on the ground, on the floor, nearby to where the attack happened. She doesn't get rid of his phone. She doesn't leave the home. She doesn't flee, go anywhere. You saw the Google search. You can take that back with you and see all of her web history. There's no searches for how to get rid of body, how to get rid of blood evidence, how to dispose of anything. She testified on direct that there's a lake across the street from her. If you're trying to set the scene, get rid of evidence, it's probably a pretty good place to start. Didn't happen. Came out, she saw the sudden, cold end to a tumultuous marriage laying on the ground, and she couldn't process it. And then her actions afterwards proved that. It said that witnesses Tara Lynn Tucker, Frederick Copeland have no reason to lie. Why is she out talking with them? Where is she speaking with them? She's speaking with them on January 13th, 14th in the Baker Act facility, in the mental health facility where she has been taken because she harmed herself after the events of the night of January 11th. State attorney said that Ms. Tucker has no motivation to lie. Okay, she could have a motivation to do her job, to follow the law, record the conversation, so that we're not forced to rely on her memory of the conversation 3.5 years later when assessing witness credibility. So she comes home from the facility. Her kids are there. She's put in a spot where she needs to explain this to them. Dad's not here. What happened, Mom? That's the situation she finds herself in. And you heard what her daughter said. She said, it's a heart attack. You heard what that did to their relationship. You saw her daughter take the stand. Heard from the jail calls where their relationship stands now. The jail call, Ms. Redlick is talking about the evidence, the state's case. Here talking about how she's dead in the water, but what'd she also say? They're doing motions to prevent self-defense. Those statements are next to each other. I can't use self-defense. If I can't argue that, I don't have anything else, because I did it. I was in the house. I'm the one that stabbed him. If I can't argue this, I don't have anything. Is that consciousness of guilt? Is that understanding the legal situation? You hear a statement in these jail calls where she's talking about what she had spoken with another lawyer at one point when she was in custody. She said she met with him once, it was a consultation. He talked to her about the case, said it wasn't self-defense. She said she told her attorneys that. Seconds later in the same call, you hear her talking about how it was. You hear her talking about how it was self-defense. It was self-defense. Well, these out of context calls.
Objection, Your Honor. Proper argument. Related to the instruction you read.
Come up.
All right, we have a sidebar during the closing of the defense, so let's talk about it with criminal defense attorneys Franz Borghardt and Marie Pereira. Thank you both. Marie, I'll start with you. The defense making some strong points. They're arguing that anything that happened after the alleged stabbing shouldn't be relevant to whether or not this was murder or criminal here. Are you buying that?
I'm not buying it completely, but he is doing a very good job at humanizing her. I don't think that was a smart move because I think it looks a little callous, but he is humanizing her and he's explaining trauma, her bad decisions driven by fear, and that it was a tragedy. And I like the fact that he attacked the opposing views of the experts who talked about how long it took him to die, because I think just the image of her standing over his dying body over hours and hours as opposed to minutes really makes her look like a monster. And he's really doing a lot of damage control as far as that's concerned by bringing up that discrepancy.
Yeah, that's a huge point.
I don't think it was a good idea.
That's a huge point. I was going to bring that up next because that stood out to me as well. Franz, they're talking about the medical examiner's testimony on the stand saying that someone could bleed out, could take up to a couple of hours. The defense wanted to make sure in rebuttal. They called the detective who said no. Actually, the expert said it could be 5 to 6 minutes. That really does go to the heart of this defense case because, like Marie said, it's whether or not she just stood by and let him bleed out for those hours, or was it so quick she was still hiding in the bathroom in fear and already deceased? Explain more why that's important.
So my concern is in this case, above all other cases, the defense looking at someone and saying, you were lying. That's problematic, right? Because we clearly have a defendant that has had different versions of the truth, I'll say. So you're not gonna win points, I think, with this jury trying to say, well, this person's lying. Well, the response is going to be, well, your client lied a whole bunch. I think what's important here is with regard to the specific jury instructions in Florida for what constitutes murder, what constitutes manslaughter, there are certain boxes that the prosecutors have to check. And those boxes get checked in part with some of the post-killing behavior. There's no way around it, right? If she's just sitting there, watching the body on the ground and there's certain things that happen, those things I believe the jury should consider and can consider. Now, that all being said, I agree with Maria. I think they've done a good job humanizing her. She is not a monster. That is what I'm hearing. That all being said, they're walking a fine line in my mind, because at the end of the day, some of the evidentiary things that we would have been able to see at the crime scene are gone because of the defendant.
Exactly, and that's why she's facing that tampering with evidence charge also. That will be before this jury at any moment. We're still listening to the defense wrap up its case. Thank you, Franz and Marie. We're going to squeeze in a quick break while they're at that sidebar. Don't go anywhere. We'll take you back inside that Orlando, Florida courtroom for the rest of the closing arguments in the kitchen knife murder trial. You're watching Court TV.
I believe my husband is deceased. He's stiff and he's wounded. He might have had a heart attack.
Welcome back. The defense attorney for Danielle Redlick is trying to make those final arguments for his client, arguing this was self-defense. Let's go back in and watch.
Here that she did not have a duty to retreat. There is no law requiring her to get away, to try to get away from him. You heard that she tried. She's struggling underneath him. She's pinned. She's trapped. She's unable to move. But the law does not require that she do that. Even though she's trying to, it's not required. She doesn't have to run out the door, run to the corner, and wait until her back's up against the wall. That is not the law that's in front of you. And that man stopping her from breathing, pressing her up against the island, has his hands on her face. She pulls out the knife, she grabs the knife, and he re-engages, grabs his hand, back goes her face, down comes the knife. She doesn't have to get away there. The only way that she's able to escape is by doing what she did. And we know that her goal was to escape because she stabbed him one time. If she's stabbing him out of hatred, ill will, spite, probably seeing more than one stab wound there. It's probably not to the shoulder. She's probably not running to the bathroom. is her belief reasonable? The question is not if anyone is put in that situation, do they think it's reasonable? The question is her in that spot, with her life experiences, her experiences with her husband, is it reasonable for her at that point to feel that great bodily harm or death is coming to her if she doesn't act? You'll see these instructions.
15 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Judge. As to what she can defend against. He's trying to kill her. The same instructions that you see on the second-degree murder. If the evidence shows you his actions over those 2 days led to what she testified to, his increasing rage, his anger, his violence, the alcohol, that has all led to what she described. She reasonably believes at that point, while she can't breathe, while she's trapped and pinned against the island in the middle of her home, that she's going to die, then yes, absolutely, she's justified in using deadly force. If you think that it's not reasonable that she thought she was going to die, you look at aggravated battery. Michael Redlick actually and intentionally touched or struck Danielle Justine Redlick against her will. Michael Redlick, in committing the battery, intentionally or knowingly caused great bodily harm to Danielle Redlick. What this says is, if it happens or if there's an attempt, it does not require, the law in Florida does not ever require that a person take the first blow, that they get hit first before they can defend themselves. She doesn't have to have a broken bone or scarring or concussion, anything like that, before she's allowed to defend herself. Why? Because if that's what the law required, she's not going to get the chance to defend herself. So if the state gets up here and argues that the injuries that she sustained, the bruising on her arm, which is consistent with being pressed up against the kitchen island, the injuries to her knees, which are consistent with being hit in the head, going down, before she's dragged up by the hair and placed on the island. The injuries she complained about on the side of her head, where she's held down like this by her husband as he's covering her face. If the state attorney tells you, or if you're thinking yourself, those injuries aren't good enough to prove that she needed to use justifiable force, it's not what the law requires. She doesn't have to have injuries to be in fear of that man. She just has to reasonably believe his violent attack against her is going to cause death, great bodily harm.